Joining us now on CBS in Boston is Congressman Stephen Lynch. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time, for being with us. Do we have him here? Yes, Congressman, thank you. Can you take us through your experience 1 year ago today?
Oh, sure. I was at the Capitol. We were doing a couple of interviews with some of your press colleagues over in the Dirksen building. And then when the mob came up after the remarks of the former president, the crowd became a little hostile, so we could not get back into the Capitol. And the Capitol Police basically took me back to my apartment and put a cruiser outside. And then eventually, as the crowd was cleared, we went back into the Capitol and resumed the counting of the electoral votes.
Yeah. And 1 year ago, I was standing here on this side of the camera, watching the events as they transpired. And like any riot like this, it started slowly and then suddenly, right? And as people were scaling those steps to the Capitol, it became more alarming. When did you first sense something was seriously wrong, that this wasn't just people walking into the building?
You know, Paula, the odd thing is my apartment is a couple of blocks from the Capitol, so I walk back and forth. And for those 2 days, you know, the crowd started to gather the day before on January 5th. And so I had been walking through that crowd without incident for a couple of days between votes. You know, you have to leave the Capitol and then come back on. But I had no indication until the president's speech. That seemed to be the moment when the mood turned, and then they marched up to the Capitol and onto the steps and then breached the barrier. So it changed very, very quickly. I was stunned, really. You know, it was a disgraceful day, but just the way it turned in a matter of moments was really troubling.
Was there one image that stands out in your memory?
Well, you know, when we got back into the Capitol to see how they had trashed it, you know, it's an old historic building with a lot of grace and dignity, and to see the way they had trashed it was disheartening and disgraceful. You know, just I'll never forget that. You know, I just never imagined that American citizens would attack their own government, their own capital. You know, the cradle of liberty. I just could never imagine that, but it happened.
Let me ask you.
And now we have to hold people accountable.
Sure. Let me ask you, as a leader, in all sincerity, there are, as we saw in a poll earlier this week, some 20 million Americans or so who said in a poll they believe some political violence is justified at times. And some of them truly believe that now, a year later, this is being overstated. That some of the people there that day have only been charged with trespassing, for instance. And they're sort of looking at a lot of the commemorations today as being overplayed. Having been there and as a political leader, what would you say to those Americans if you could speak to them one-on-one?
Well, I would question where they get their information. You know, they agree with this president, the former president, Trump, that the election was stolen. But if they look at the facts, there were 63 cases brought across the country by Rudy Giuliani and former President Trump to overturn that election. All 63 of those cases failed, the vast majority of them for lack of evidence. So this, you know, the Trump's allegation that the election was stolen is the big lie. That's the big lie.
Right.
But you know, some of the judges who rejected his case were appointed by Trump.
Sure.
They were Republican appointed judges. Some of them in cases where they have to run in their states for judge, you know, were Republicans themselves. There were Republican election officials that rejected the claims. There's no basis to this lie. And you know, and so I just ask people to look at the facts and not to get off Twitter and look at the real facts.
Sure. Are you confident the work that the January 6th committee is doing will be successful? And do you think the people responsible will be held accountable?
Well, the only tool they have is subpoena power. And I'm not sure that they have the power to hold people accountable. They're an evidence gathering body. The force of law would have to be applied by the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland. So, that will really be where the decision is made on who to prosecute and what the charges shall be.
Are you confident this was an isolated incident?
Oh, no, not at all. This was a movement, and the cover-up, the denial, is just a continuation of that. These people are living in a fantasy world with this conspiracy theory that the election was stolen when it was not. I've seen this in other countries. I spend a fair amount of time in failed states like Afghanistan and in Pakistan in some cases, in Iraq, Somalia, and the one common thread is when the rule of law is destroyed and is not followed, and when the facts and the truth are denied. That's part and parcel to that whole process. It was troubling enough to see in other countries. It's devastating to see that happening in the United States. I worry for my country.
Yes.
I worry about this fringe element that are denying the truth and acting with violence on this bizarre conspiracy. Yes. It's very, very troubling.
And at the end of the day, what makes us different is the electors did speak, and President Biden was sworn into office. And so we can hopefully look toward the completion of that electoral process with hope for the future. Congressman Stephen Lynch.
I look forward to the country getting back together. We've got to come back together. We have some real threats facing this country, and we can face them best when we're united.
Absolutely. Congressman Stephen Lynch, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Paula.